Anthrax is a serious infectious disease caused by gram-positive rod-shaped bacteria known as Bacillus anthracis. It occurs naturally in soil and commonly affects domestic and wild animals around the world. A visit to Dr. Agantem Ekuma, a microbiologist, University of Uyo Teaching Hospital, UUTH, unveiled that people can get sick with anthrax if they come in contact with infected animals or contaminated animal products.
Anthrax is a bacterial infection that is transmitted through the spores of a bacteria called Bacillus anthracis. So these spores are usually found in the soil, but they can infect animals, particularly herbivorous animals, while they are feeding on plants and all that. They could get infected. Now, when the animals get infected, the infection could be deadly, and because the organism will multiply in these animals, if they die of the disease or if they are down with the disease, that organism can be transmitted to any persons that may come in contact with that animal.
People get sick with anthrax when spores get into the body. The bacteria can then multiply, spread out in the body, produce toxins, and cause severe illness. This can only happen when people breathe in spores, eat food or drink water contaminated with spores, or get spores in a cut.
For humans, there are about 3 types of diseases they can acquire when they are infected with this organism. So they could have a cutaneous anthrax, that's when the organism infects them through the skin, or it could be an inhalational anthrax when they inhale the organism. And then very rarely there can be an intestinal anthrax, so that's when you eat when the organism is introduced through food that one has eaten. So those are the 3 forms of anthrax that can occur. If the food is well cooked, that proper boiling should be able to kill any spores that is present in food. And the way we season our meat here, I believe that it will be effective in killing any anthrax organism that may be in your food. But note that this animal must have been infected by this disease and probably died, or at least the sickness was identified before the animal was killed. So again, it will not be common, except maybe someone who is inspecting these animals has not done so.
The disease is most common in domestic and wild animals who become infected when they breathe in or inject spores in contaminated soil, plants, or water. These animals can include cattle, sheep, goats, antelope, among others. Anthrax disease has always been in existence. It is most common in agricultural regions of Central and South America, Sub-Saharan Africa, Central and Southwestern Asia, Southern and Eastern Europe, among others. Though anthrax disease case has been recorded in Niger State, but it is generally rare in Nigeria.
This organism has been there from when we started discovering what bacteria were. I remember that we've not known microorganisms were discovered as a cause of illness barely 4 centuries ago. So before then, if these diseases occurred, they probably were associated with something else. So, but it has been there, probably in the soil, among crops, affecting animals, and occasional human transmission. So it has always been there. However, the profile was raised when a few decades ago, I think maybe 2011 or so, in the United States, there was a case of bioterrorism where anthrax spores were put in letters and sent to people, and some of them got infected. And I think there were 22 cases, out of which 6 of them died, in the United States. So that just shows you how severe this infection can be if when it occurs, and all those, the ones who died all had the inhalation anthrax. Some of the people with inhalation anthrax survived. Those who had skin anthrax, those ones all survived. So that just gives you a picture of how severe this disease could be. So I think the concern at this present time is if it is used for bioterrorism. Note that no case has been reported in Nigeria, especially in recent times. So I think it's quite extremely rare, and so the cause for concern should be low.
Speaking on the 4 common routes of anthrax infection, Dr. Ekuma said each has different signs and symptoms. In most cases, symptoms develop within 6 days of exposure to the bacteria.
There are 3 forms of the disease. Skin infection, so that it initially, where the organism where this bacteria will enter the skin, it may look like an insect bite, but then it will lead to swelling around that. After a few days, initially looks like an insect bite or a pimple, but after a few days, there will be swelling all around that area, and it will be warm, and the fever could affect the general body. So at that point, if antibiotic treatment is instituted early, the infection can be controlled, and it may just leave a scar at that area. All the swelling will subside. But if it's not treated properly and it spreads beyond that, and the body's immune system is not able to control it, could spread beyond and begin to affect other parts of the body. So that's for the skin one, which I think is the most common one that is reported. Again, I must say that anthrax is quite a rare disease. I'm not aware of cases that have been reported in Nigeria or mortality. So in the literature, there are few cases. So then the inhalational anthrax, like I've said, so it's the other name of that disease is called wool sorter's disease. So it's common among people who work with wool, in wool plantation with animal skins and all that. So that is where the name came from. So when they inhale these spores, they develop chest pain, fever, and if treatment is not commenced early, to spread to other parts of the body, and it may be difficult to treat. So, and it could be fatal. So that's it. Chest pain, fever in someone that has been exposed to sick animals. So that would point to a possible case of anthrax. Then, so the intestinal one, so that would probably be if someone has eaten food or meat from a sick animal, or if the spores have somehow gotten into the food and the food was not well cooked. So I think that explains why it is rare, because most people eat food that has been cooked to an extent, but a few cases have been reported, although of course not in Nigeria.
Inhalation anthrax has been identified as the deadliest form of the infection. If not treated, can lead to loss of life in human.
For people taking care of these animals, if they come close to the animals, or if one is working with anything that came from the animal, particularly the skin of these animals, if the spores are on that skin, one could inhale them while walking on them. They could just become aerosolized, taken up in the air, and one could inhale them, and that is the most severe form of the infection. So if it is inhaled, it will enter the lungs and cause infections around the chest and spread to other parts of the body. That particular infection, because it has entered inside, it can be quite severe. So it will present with chest pain, severe chest pain, and then high fever, and so on. So if treatment is not instituted early, it can be fatal.
Treatment and prevention of anthrax infections varies both in animals and human. Vaccinations are recommended for animals who are sick or infected, while antibodies, anthrax vaccination, avoiding the consumption of dead, sick or infected animals, among others, are preventive measures for human.
Prevention has to do with looking out for the infection among animals and then proper control of the infection at that stage. So for those who keep animals, cattle, goats, sheep, all those type of animals, if any of those animals get sick, they should be separated from the other animals, and veterinary care should be given. And if that is not available and the animal dies, should be buried and should not be eaten. And even those taking care of the animals should have minimal contact as much as possible. If they are touching those animals, they should make sure they are wearing protective gloves and protective clothing like that. Most antibiotics are effective against this organism, but the condition is that the treatment has to be started early. So once the infection is suspected and antibiotic therapy is commenced early, then there is a good chance of recovery. Human vaccines have been developed but not widely available, and I don't think they're available in the country. For prevention in animals too, there is an animal vaccine that can be used to protect animals for against this disease. So if an animal is vaccinated and comes in contact with this organism, maybe while feeding in the field, it will not have a severe disease and will not transmit it to human. This disease is not transmissible from one person to another. So you can only get it from animals or animal products, but it cannot be transmitted from one person to the other.